It's time to gather loved ones together for all the holidays' best spread. Lynn's has great prices on all your favorite Thanksgiving items, from delicious turkey with all the fixings to mashed potatoes and yummy pies. We have everything you need to create your perfect Thanksgiving dinner. Whether it's cooking the traditional meal, completely store-bought, or a combination of both, your best holiday meal starts here. Learn more and start shopping today at linsgrocery.com. Lynn's, where delicious begins.
The views and opinions expressed by A Little Bit Culty are those of the hosts and do not necessarily reflect the official policy or position of the podcast. Any content provided by our guests, bloggers, sponsors, or authors are of their opinion and are not intended to malign any religion, group, club, organization, business individual, anyone, or anything. Hey everybody, I'm Sarah Edmondson.
And I'm Anthony Ames, aka Nippy.
And we just want to welcome you to season 3 of A Little Bit Culty. Once upon a time, we were in a cult called NXIVM.
We didn't know it was a cult when we joined, because as a wise man once said, nobody joins a cult. They join a good thing.
For a minute, it was a good thing. That's where we met, fell in love, got married, started a family.
The stuff of storybooks.
Even the part where we woke up, escaped, became whistleblowers, and helped bring it all down. You call that shit show a storybook?
Seeing the mastermind of NXIVM get sentenced to 120 years in prison? That's a storybook ending, if you ask me.
The whole thing was captured on HBO's hit docuseries, The Vow.
A new season is coming out any moment, if it isn't out already by the time you hear this.
And I published a memoir called Scarred, which is available anywhere books are sold.
And now we have a podcast.
Every week on A Little Bit Culty, we call on experts, advocates, fellow survivors, and whistleblowers to help us unpack what's going on in the cultiverse.
And now we're turning our story into wisdom for other people.
Like, I wish I'd known that calling yourself Vanguard was a bit of a red flag.
Yeah, big red flag. We've got a lot to cover. So let's get this show rolling, shall we?
Welcome to A Little Bit Culty, an Acast podcast about the fads, beliefs, and trends that blur the line between devotion and destruction. Be sure to subscribe so you don't miss an episode. And to learn more, visit us on Instagram or alittlebitculty.com.
Sinking down to the depths of the ocean, hanging on to the wind of my love. Felt like going of it all I could leave, but I know I won't.
Good morning, post Super Bowl.
Is that the first thing on your mind?
I mean, it takes a while to decompress the NFL season a little bit.
Yes.
And for the record, everyone knows that the Rams won, but I think the refs blew the game on a bad penalty call before the Rams scored the touchdown, and they called the pass interference. And I think the Bengals probably should have won that game, even though I think the Rams are a better team.
Listen, I have nothing to add to this conversation. I think if you want to do a whole episode on the cult of the NFL, which apparently it's a thing.
Sarah?
Right?
You're treading on thin ice with comments like that. Just
listen,
so you
I love
know.
you, babe. I've always tried to get more into football so I can, understand your world, but I still just don't even understand what's happening when I watch it. Like, I try really hard. You've explained the downs and the lines and the things, and I'm working on it. Give me time.
I never thought our podcast would witness our demise. We were doing great. It's Valentine's Day.
No, it's not. No, we can't say that because it's already been Valentine's Day.
Yeah, but it's real Valentine's Day right now.
Okay.
I told you I loved you, got you some chocolates, and then you dismissed the NFL on me.
I'm not saying I'm dismissing it.
I'm reevaluating things. Let's just say I'm reevaluating things as we speak.
I'll make an appointment with our counselor. Hey, I got a question here from the audience. Okay.
There's an audience?
This is from a woman named Meredith Turner, and she says, I'm a big fan of the podcast and all the work you guys do. Thank you, Meredith.
Thank you, Meredith.
The recent episodes with Mark Vicente were fascinating and encouraged a lot of deep thinking for me. So I have a random question if you guys ever do a Q&A. So we are going to do a Q&A, but I thought I'd throw this one in as a bonus. I'm rewatching The Vow, and I'm noticing so many wild claims by KR that are never challenged or questioned. For example, when he meets Allison Mack for the first time and somewhat claims that art is pointless, what tactics did KR use, and what tactics, in your knowledgeable opinion, do other high control leaders use to create an environment without room for questioning? Was it subtle and or direct messaging from other members before you met him that you never questioned him? Was it an unspoken understanding in the moment when you talked? Was everything he said so word salady that coming up with a question was impossible? Also, is there a way to recognize when these tactics are being used in the moment? Thank you so much for all you do, Meredith. I think it's such a good question.
It is a good question. I have a quick answer.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a long discussion. I think in short, if you look at how cancel culture works, just in our culture right now, people get canceled, and that's the warning shot to anyone else as to how everyone should behave and think. So
Right.
it's subtle, I guess, in a lot of respects.
It's not overt because that would go against critical thinking.
Yeah, it's definitely not overt because then the force would be exposed, right? So it's force. I mean, whenever you feel force, like in that regard, I think it's a portal to ask more questions. And then if you get resistance, that's probably a telltale sign.
But in regards to Keith, Nip, like think about when you first met him. By the time I had met him, I had done a 5-day and the 11-day, I believe, or maybe almost finished the 11-day. But I'd been saying, thank you, Vanguard, after every module. We had been bowing to somebody who's not even there. I'd been hearing about him being the creator of this tech, which at the time, I had total respect for him, even though I thought he was a schlub and all that stuff. I was like, respected his mind. And so there's this, and I think a lot of these groups, they call it the Greek chorus, like the people around the leader that are pumping their tires. Yeah, flying monkeys, who are basically saying, this person knows everything about everything.
Well, also, Sarah, to your point, you were paying homage or you were respecting what you thought was his mind. And what
yes,
of
been course.
Told.
It's not his real mind.
Right. Okay.
But the point is that like the question I think she asked is like, was it subtle or direct? And it was definitely subtle because if they directly said, don't question him, then that directly goes against the fact that we thought we were, in a program that taught critical thinking. So it was more like, and like you said, with the people getting canceled, I remember there was a woman, Wendy, remember she like questioned something that was a totally legit question, but she put her hand up in front of the whole, like all of the coaching staff, all the proctors, and it was in a proctor meeting or a proctor retreat or something. And she got in so much trouble. And like, not overtly, but like as a higher rank, we were all talking about how she was being, basically, if you did that, you were deemed like being suppressive or anti-tribute or like undermining authority,
right?
I
mean, in your case, you had a situation, right, where you said something and it wasn't Keith enforcing it. It was the people around him enforcing it. And that was pretty overt.
Have we ever talked about that in the podcast?
I think you have. Yeah. You mentioned it.
The time where people got promoted who hadn't hit the criteria. And I was like, wait, what are we doing? And I got jumped on by like
so
5
that was
different
overt,
green sashes.
Wouldn't you say? Like the closer you got to Keith, the more acceptable it was to defend him overtly. But I think the more fringe it was from Keith, it was more subtle. Does that answer the question, you think?
Yeah, it was. Okay. It would be. Yeah, it'd be kind of more like it's just disrespectful. Like if you go into any situation,
good point.
Right? Like a dojo or like anyone where someone's an authority in something, you'd be like kind of rude to be like, what the fuck's up with that? Right? Like you just kind of sit back and go, okay, this person knows more than I do. I don't agree, so I'll just sit with that.
There you go. I think that's best put. It wasn't so much that you were told to be complicit. It was like there was a atmosphere that you respected because you wanted to be respectful, not because you were in line with everything that was being said. It's kind of like taking your shoes off in a Japanese restaurant or something like that.
And actually, that was one of their responses. Like there's a lot of things we taught and we learned as students on day one. This is what we do in our curriculum, in our dojo. We take off our shoes. We wear these sashes. We bow going in and out of the room. And most of the trainers, not all of them, but somebody like Lauren, for example, senior proctor salesman, would make it really like accessible. She's like, I know it's weird, but like if you go to someone's house and they take their shoes off and you're wearing your nice heels and you thought it was part of the outfit, you're like, well, I'm taking my shoes off because it's their house and that's respectful. That's the right thing to do.
And I don't think Lauren was doing it with bad intent.
No. Well, we all really believed that. And I would say legitimately, I know it's weird to put the sash around your neck, but like after you spend some time with us, you'll recognize it's a symbol for your growth. Just like my son's in, Taekwondo and he just earned his yellow belt and he's really proud of it. And I'm really proud of my green sash. I meant that. Right? So there's these things that we expressed on day one of the 5-day. Like there's going to be weird things that don't make sense to you. And they will make sense as time goes on.
That's how it works.
So a lot of the things that he said, I also filtered through that, like, okay, maybe that will make sense as time goes on to me. And I didn't question.
You start the process of accepting things with a grain of salt.
You start the process of accepting that he's the authority.
Yeah.
And that's really the thing that like gets pulled out from under you. Like when people say, how did you wake up? Recognizing that Keith is not who he said he was pulls everything out from the foundation of a whole belief system that I can see was false because it's not true. Keith is not who he said he was. He's not the authority.
And then it allows you to see how actually these tactics of obedience are actually tactics of abuse.
Right. Which is exactly what we're going to talk about today with our guests. We have another leader who is a self-proclaimed authority with a much smaller group. Like I see this guy is kind of like Keith Raniere when he's like in his 30s, smoking cigars and like a
Wearing
social media
power suits.
douche, allegedly.
I remember in our first episode, Sarah, where we professed that we weren't going to punch down and all that, but this is...
I think
one's
to call
tempting.
somebody a douche who is a douche is not punching down. It's just
No,
saying
no, no,
you're
no,
a
no,
douche.
no, 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 no. I'm not even. It's not even a response to that. I'm just biting my tongue right now at this guy.
It's really difficult. It's really difficult. So this guy, his name is Bentinho.
Bentinho Massaro.
No. We have to get the name right. Bentinho Massaro.
Oh, it's Bentinho Massaro.
Bentinho Massaro. But listen, for
Sarah,
those of you who
Sarah,
remember.
you love my nicknames.
No. Nippy has nicknames for many of our close friends. Some of them are nicer than others. Some of them, like we have a friend, Erin, her daughter's name is Lyric. Nippy calls her Cut and Paste because Lyric looks exactly like Erin. Like that's a sweet name. But like Nippy has trouble remembering people's names, so he doesn't refer to them as Erin and Lyric. It's just Cut and Paste.
Yeah,
Bentinho is not only hard to say, but we didn't even want to anoint him with the pleasure of saying his name right. So we've actually been referring to him since the whole time we've been prepping this episode, which is months now.
Yeah.
We just call him Bento Box.
He's the bento box. And then
Or
I
just
just
the box.
call him the box when we get in the box on here. And then I took a picture of a bento box menu and sent it to the thread of all the people that you will now hear in an interview.
And by the way, this is a really cutting edge thing. Not cutting edge. By the way, this is a this is a new, not cutting edge. That's not the right word at all. I still have COVID brain. It is a different approach for us. Actually, when we first did this interview, we had 4 people lined up. And one person decided that they didn't want to be a part of it for their own mental health, which is totally fair. And so we now have 3.
I sometimes wish we had done more of, but I totally respect that.
Somebody warned us halfway through. I think it was actually, oh my God, again, COVID brain fart. What's his name? Handsome model, ex-football, former cult.
Hoyt. Yeah.
Hoyt Richards, who we're going to totally have on as a guest.
Great
and
guy.
He's awesome.
Awesome guy.
A really great guy. And we connected with him through Stephen Hassan. Anyway, Hoyt said to us, I recommend not processing your trauma on film. We
Sarah
were
was like, screw that.
like already done. Oops. I'm saying that, we laugh, but this interview is still fresh. Like the people who we speak to are fresh out of the bento box's grip. It's a little raw. So I'm not going to say too much more about it, except, bear with us as we try to navigate a conversation with 4, but eventually 3 people on our podcast. I hope you can follow along. It's going to be a 2-part episode because it's long.
It's a double album. It's a
double album
We got
again.
another double album.
But we're releasing them on the same day.
Sarah, should we call it a box set?
Oh,
Like that? Huh? Like
that
that?
gives me so
Huh?
much pleasure.
Huh? You like that?
I can't even tell you. That's so good.
Yeah.
But we're releasing them on the same day because we also want to not give the box that much time to deal with the fact that a bunch of people are coming out to say, hey, box, how you're treating us isn't cool. And we want to support the survivors of the box and give them a platform to share their story in a safe way. And there's going to be some other articles coming out about him. And I'm feeling really good about it, that we're a part of this exposing of douchebaggery.
Okay. The box. He's under scrutiny for allegedly using his well-crafted social media image to cultivate a following of devotees who abandon critical thinking and pay upwards of $1,200 a month for his online courses. In other words, this guy's a little bit culty.
As far as self-styled spiritual leaders go, Bentinho Massaro has a pretty unique and made for Instagram image. Adventure sports, international travel, cigar smoking. Oh my.
Cigar smoking. Oh my God. But at last look, he's got over 44,000 Instagram followers and upwards of 100,000 Facebook followers.
For an alleged cult leader with some fringe ideas, he's got some pretty ambitious plans and notions, like building a fully enlightened society by 2035. And he claims to vibrate at a higher frequency than other humans.
How's he measuring that, I wonder? Like, yeah,
I
I
have no
vibrate
idea.
higher than you. What's up?
Nippy. I totally vibrate higher than you.
Well, that's because, well, I'm going to leave that one alone.
Thanks.
He's also been on a mission to develop something he calls the Trendfinity Tech Lab that will take secret government tech that they, quote, won't tell you about and bring it to the public. And wait for it, that tech will finally allow humans to connect with alien civilizations and do interdimensional travel. Wonder how much that ticket cost.
He's fairly young, but this douche canoe seems on track to be a culty overachiever.
I read a description of him somewhere, and someone said it's Steve Jobs meets Jim Jones.
Ugh. In 2017, Bentinho hosted a retreat in Sedona that allegedly turned deadly for one of his attendees, sparking an ongoing investigation as to whether the so-called guru encouraged followers to commit suicide in his teachings. By the way, do not confuse this guy's Sedona retreat with the Dawn Yoga retreat in Sedona that led to a woman's death, or the James Anthony Ray Sweat Lodge in Sedona that resulted in 3 deaths.
Sedona. Jesus.
I used to really like Sedona. I feel
but you can still like
icky
it.
about
It's just
it now.
where people kind of feel like, let's go take our cult there. All right. He allegedly tells really disturbing stories as part of his shtick. One of his set pieces concerns a story about him torturing his pet kitten as a child.
I mean, what in the actual fuck? That is so the trademark of a sociopath. Anyway, that's a little bit of the very fucked up backstory. Our guests today are the real story. They're coming forward as whistleblowers, and they've trusted us to help them get their story out there and expose the truth about this dude.
This is a first for ALBC, so we'll share this with both a content warning that some of this will be hard to hear and graphic, and also with the legal disclaimer that this is all about alleged douchebaggery. So don't sick your liars on us, Bento Box. You're wasting your time.
Also, P.S. Fuck you very much, Bento.
Here's our conversation with Jade, Jacqueline, and Keelan about their experience with the spiritual influencer, Bentinho Massaro, a.k.a. The Box.
Enjoy. Welcome, everybody. Thank you guys for trusting us with this very sensitive and current breaking news moment in a Little Bit Culty's experience. But why don't we first say like who you are, where you're from, why you decided to do this today? How about that? Who wants to go first?
I'll go.
Keelan looks ready. Go for it, Keelan.
Yeah. So my name's Keelan. I grew up in Orlando, Florida, where I'm at currently. I am an artist. I like doing videography, photography, and stuff. So I stumbled across this journey, the story you'll hear about. But the reason I'm doing this is just because I feel it's super important and it's become a part of my story now. And I feel like it has a much wider impact than just myself. So I feel like it's important to come forward and share these topics and what I learned and what I'm still learning along the way.
Thank you, Keelan. Jacqueline is the first person who reached out to me about Bento Box. So Jacqueline, why don't you hit it?
Okay, hi. I'm Jacqueline. I'm from Toronto. Oh fuck, I'm so nervous.
It's okay.
Yeah, I fucking don't know what to say.
How did you end up here on this podcast?
Well, I reached out to Sarah when I left this group, not ever expecting to be on this podcast or ever sharing my story publicly. I don't even think I mentioned anyone's names. And Sarah was just so helpful for my process coming out. And now I feel like it would be important for other people to hear this story. Like even just knowing that this is my experience through my lens. And the few people that I've shared this story with have felt like they've gained something from it and seen a certain perspective. And yeah, I think it'd be valuable. And just supporting the other people in this group who feel that they want to share as well.
That's great.
Thank you for trusting us. Jade, are you feeling okay to share who you are a little bit for our audience?
Yes, I'm going to try and keep my voice not shaky so much.
It's totally fine if it shakes.
My name is Jade Electra. I'm from Orange County, California. I, like everyone else in this group, echo the sentiment that I didn't expect to be here, nor do I really want to. But it just feels like sometimes the path takes you on a journey, and it's just how it is. So I definitely did not expect to have been sucked into this whirlwind of an experience. And I just want this to be out there for anyone that feels unsure of themselves or loses their own heart or their own power.
I have a feeling this might be in a slightly more emotional episode of A Little Bit Culty. And just to speak to what the part of your story you just shared of, I think any of us who've been in a group where defectors have left, we're trained to shun and block the people who leave because, you know, they're speaking of hate and they're destroying the mission and all the things. And it takes a lot of humility to go, oh shit, I was wrong. And I'm sorry for doing that. And at least for me, anyone who says that to me, who's did that to me when I left, water under the bridge, like we're all on the same side now. I first heard about this because Jacqueline reached out, and she's the one who, if I correct me if I'm wrong, Jacqueline, but you sort of snapped to it with the vow.
Yeah.
How did you first hear about this guy, and what was the thing that drew you in?
So I grew up in a household that was very open. Spiritually, I grew up with the concepts like the law of attraction, and in my early 20s was already into like Abraham Hicks and Bashar and Buddhist teachings. And I somehow stumbled across Bentinho's teachings on the internet. And he was just this young kid who looked very kind and pure. And he was so articulate. I felt like he could just explain these concepts in a way that other people couldn't. And so since this was already such a background in my history, it felt like a homey feeling, like I know this person in some way. And so I actually followed him for a long time before I met him in person. And I had gone to a few of his retreats. And yeah, it seemed really wonderful. I also feel like I understood sort of Bentinho's tough love way of being, sort of like so firmly holding you to a certain standard to reach your highest potential. I really just felt like his mission was for people to reach their highest potential. So that's what hooked me in. And I ended up visiting him at a mutual friend's place in Canada. And there were just a few people there. I asked him, what is holding me back? And his first response was, you're too masculine. You're too in your masculine. And I can't really guide you because you're so masculine. Like I don't feel like I can reach you. And there's something about that resonated with me because I've always felt to be quite masculine in a lot of ways. So I agreed with him. And he said, can I try something? And this should have been like my first red flag, but it wasn't. He asked if he could lay on me. And we were in like a group setting and there were people around. And my first impulse inside was like, fuck off. Like, you're not going to lie on me in front of a bunch of people. But then I thought, oh, fuck, this is my masculine energy trying to sabotage me from being more feminine. And so I said, okay, like you need to do this. And so he lay on top of me and he put all his weight on me in like a kind of sexual way. And there was some aspect of it that felt like, okay, like I'm just supposed to like surrender into my feminine. I felt a sexual energy coming up. After that, he sent me all of these messages like, whoa, there was this power in you and I've never seen this before. And I'm so intrigued. And that was the beginning of his courting phase where he started to massively love bomb me. Another interesting part of this story, which is like more woo-woo, is that the person that we were staying with was an intuitive, in air quotes. And she told us after that we were meant to be together, like we were a divine couple. And Bentinho is aware. He plays it off as like, oh, wow, we're meant to be together. And like, man, was that believable. Like he was, you're never going to hold a door again in your life. I want to have babies with you. You're the most beautiful woman. You're so powerful. Anything that I said was like God's gift to him.
Let me ask you, Jacqueline, how did that feel to be love bombed and to be treated that way by somebody you respected?
Oh man, it felt amazing. And I had never had an experience with someone like that before. So there were no red flags in terms of like, this is what people do and you shouldn't trust this person. And I really respected him as sort of an authority and like someone who's able to read energies. So for someone to come and say like, I see all these magical, wonderful things about you in a way that's kind of accurate. Like I feel like he is intelligent and he does pick up on our strengths. So it was believable, but I even at the beginning, I had my breaks up with him and I was like, I don't want to just like go in and believe that this is all true. But he very quickly moved into, I want to marry you type of words, explaining that he had not had those feelings before, that I was the safest woman. Like he felt the safest with me that he's ever felt with anyone. And I genuinely felt like he could be safe with me because I genuinely cared for him so much and I cared for his mission and I felt like I could support him and that I was strong and that all felt very believable. But like the level of love bombing, which is now a term that I know, was like astronomically high, like ridiculously high. So he also was holding me to this standard. Like he has this vision of me being a certain way, being very strong and dominant and powerful. And so he would like criticize my home or criticize aspects of me that weren't the embodied version that he saw. And I had a hard time with that. And I remember one time being like, this sucks. Like, I don't like this. And he just put his head in his hands and was just like, fuck, I hate my job sometimes. Like, I just have to do this, like, for you to reach your highest potential. Like, it sucks. Like, what of that kind of energy. And my gut feeling was like, ugh, this feels terrible. I don't like this. But still this part of me that's like, okay, this is someone that's going to finally hold me to being this version of myself that I totally want to be.
Before things turn, can you just give like, what was your life like in the times when things were good?
So when at the retreats, that's what we were doing. We were listening to meditations or his guided meditations and his seminars and like his community was actually really beautiful. Some of like the most beautiful people I've met are in that community and have been in that community. So there was a very wonderful sense of family and fun. When I was with him in this setting in a relationship, we were one-on-one traveling together in Canada. So it was more of the focus on us and our relationship at that time.
So there's a sense of community. People are doing these workshops. You're reaching your highest potential. You have these tools that he created. Now, is he saying that he created these tools or is he like, and I took this from here and I took this from there? Like, what's his background, as he says?
He studied these things from a very young age, and he doesn't flat out say that they're his teachings in a direct way, but he definitely feels that he masters them very quickly and then surpasses the teacher. So he sort of views himself as like the foremost authority on any of these subjects.
What are his credentials? Like, did he study under these gurus or he just learned about them in books and online?
He went to India. I don't know enough of the specifics.
Well, I know that he was in and out of seminars from age 10 to 17, and then he did a year in India when he was 19. I believe that's right.
Well, that's what he says anyway.
So he had been at these seminars and learned the tactics, I think, at these seminars is from what I read.
Right. And I think that he has had some profound spiritual experiences that fall in line with all of these ancient teachings.
I think that's good in terms of like understanding your hook and what brought you in to how you got to him and then how he got to you. Yes?
Yeah, I would say so.
It's an important thing to address because the way these people work is they set up, it's going to be difficult. And when it's difficult and abusive, you can't check out because you've already been set up the conditions that you're going to experience. So you're willing to go through a little bit more abuse because you think it's part of your growth and not abuse. It's been consistent through how all these guys work.
All of our episodes.
Yeah, especially when the mission of the company or cult is to enlighten the entire civilization. So it's a pretty high stakes game. You think you're...
I would laugh at
Should
that.
also
and
be a red
you,
flag.
if it didn't happen to me.
I did not
Yeah.
expect to be part of this Brady
Huge red
Bunch.
Let's
flag.
just point that out as a red flag. If your group is claiming to save the world, that's a red flag. Keelan, do you want to share your hook? How did you hear about this guy?
Yeah, so this goes back 5 or 6 years ago. I was in college, Florida State University, and I started kind of diving down the rabbit hole of conspiracy theories online and like into UFOs and people coming forward from the military and sharing their experiences that they had with extraterrestrials, like shutting down nuclear sites and stuff. I was like, well, damn, like I'm not learning this in school. Like I just had a feeling that a lot more was going on planet Earth than I was being told. So I started experimenting with psychedelics, like just really trying to figure myself out. And I ended up dropping into college, like leaving all my friends behind. And I really dove down the rabbit hole of conspiracy theories and was convinced that the government was just a cabal and they did all these like crazy rituals. And so I'm like, dude, I'm going to create a documentary and like blow the lid off this thing. Like I'm going to let everyone know what's actually going on. So I'm like working on this like documentary in my room and listening meanwhile, like at night to like ease the pain of how crazy the rabbit hole is. I'm listening to people like Alan Watts or like Esther Hicks. None of my family and friends around me understood. So I was isolated in that sense. And I stumbled across one of his videos on YouTube from just the algorithm. And it was like something about super accelerated living or law of attraction, manifestation. And like in it, he was like, you know, the government wouldn't exist if we weren't all so lame. And like by being angry at something, you're giving your power away to it. Meanwhile, I'm working on a, you know, documentary to overthrow the government. And I'm like, well, damn, maybe I'm being lame. Like maybe we could just focus on creating a better reality. And I'm like, and what is this guy up to? He captured my curiosity. He was the first one that really made me realize that you could feel how you want to feel regardless of circumstances. And to me, that was like profound. I was like, holy shit, like I don't have to base what's going on in my life, like how I'm feeling based on what's going on in my life. I can just like choose to feel however I want regardless. And then from that state of being, attract an epic life, boom, boom. I'm like, okay, cool. So I was like, damn. But basically I created a video for a video contest. In the video contest, your goal was to make the viewer feel like heaven on earth was a possibility. And so what I did was I incorporated a lot of his teachings, which, you know, he borrowed from other sources too. And I dropped it in his Facebook community page and said, hey, you guys might enjoy this. I incorporated some of Bentinho's stuff. And he responded to it. And he's like, dude, this is amazing. If you ever want to create content for my company one day, like, let me know. And I was like psyched because I'm like, dang, like I just dropped out of college. I didn't know what I'm going to do with my life. Now I have this like seemingly good opportunity. So immediately I pretty much plugged myself into, like, I didn't even wait. I just like, you know, following his teachings of don't wait for permission, become what you want to be in the world and let the world respond to you. I was like, I'm going to hire myself as creative director of this company before he does, you know? So I just started dedicating like hundreds of hours to creating sweet content, dropping it in the community, building a relationship with the community online. They were like loving it, like freaking out about it. I felt like I was aligning to my life purpose. So we kind of started building a relationship, like shooting some text messages back and forth and shooting videos back and forth of ideas for the company and the vision. And he eventually invited me out to Egypt, where I met the whole team and pretty much had the opportunity to just start traveling the world with these people. And in my mind, doing what I thought was going to be epic shit and like helping out the planet. So by getting these teachings out there and empowering people and helping them to like live a life of abundance and like the spiritualist dream. So that's really what drew me in, was like the vision, the mission aspect of it. Because he had this amazing company at the time called Trendfinity. And they had all these cool like missions that they were going to do, like even into creating companies that were going to help us bridge with other extraterrestrials, like awakened media, like all this cool shit. So
Was he paying you to do this?
no, not at all.
So
No.
you were doing all this voluntarily?
Yeah. With the idea that like I would get paid one day.
How were you supporting yourself?
I was doing freelance stuff on the side.
Okay. But the idea was that maybe that he was going to pay you at some
Yeah.
point?
The
or
idea was like,
in your mind at least?
yeah, the idea was like, I'm going to kick the door down and get
Okay.
on the team.
Okay. Now, the awareness you had about being able to feel however you want, regardless, do you still have that belief?
Yeah. Well, I'd still do meditation and still do practices like that, but I'd say it's
Got it.
like not as bypassy as it used to be.
Okay. So the hook was purpose, I'd say a lot, right?
Yeah, I'd say so. Yeah, that was the cake, and the icing on it was like getting
Okay.
to travel and like smoke cigars and be cool.
I saw the cigars. Yeah. Those were a lot. All right. So then what? When did it start to go south?
Well, it was just such a different environment. Like I remember I started to just observe and sit back and see the way he was treating them. And I'm like really trying to grapple with this because I felt like he was a guy with integrity and I felt like he was pure of heart. But certain things he started doing, it became obvious to me like gradually that he really didn't care about the mission. He just cared about living a lifestyle that he wanted to live. But mainly the red flags for me was the way he treated the girls he was in a relationship with.
Wow. Jade, how did you get in?
So a couple years ago, a friend of mine talked to me about one of his favorite teachers. I looked at like the thumbnails of some of his teachings, and as soon as I tried to listen, I seriously would go to sleep, or my brain just didn't hear anything. It was like a scramble was occurring. But I found something about him interesting. Two things happened. One, I saw a podcast of his It was the first video I got through randomly of his. And I probably got like 30 minutes in or so, but it felt like I could finally all of a sudden kind of hear one of his teachings for the first time. I'm like, oh my God, maybe I'm getting more clear or something. I'm getting smarter. I don't know, spiritually smarter. So I listened to that. And then my boyfriend at the time and I broke up, and I went to this, again, tarot reader, in quotes, who didn't know anything about anyone or anything about me. And she did this spread where she saw that I had two people coming into my life. One, she said my ex-boyfriend was going to be back. Two, that there was another man I was going to meet in December who was older than my ex, who wasn't my soulmate, but was good for the world. And that the things that we would do together would be good for the world. And that was like just a weird reading. I've never even heard anyone say anything worldly. So when December rolled around and I hadn't met anyone, I got a little letter from Corey, who's in the group, a little message that was inviting me to come and stay with them for a month in wherever they were in the world. And I wasn't even allowed to know where they were when we were talking. It was so secretive and I couldn't tell anyone. Like, I was afraid. I was not supposed to tell anyone in my whole family or friends where I was going. And I had to sign an NDA to get into it. So anyways, I was kind of unsure, and my boyfriend at the time, we tried to work things out again, and it just was not working. And after almost 4 years of trying that, my soul was just kind of unsure, and I felt so depleted in every way. So when I got this invitation, I kind of just sat on it, and I told them, yeah, maybe I'll come for like 7 days, but I'm not going to come for a month. That just seems a lot. I don't know any of you. And something in my field about it was kind of afraid. Like, when you know you're going to step into some portal and it's going to change you, you're not sure how, but it's going to leave a mark that you'll never be the same from. Like, I just knew that on some level. So I had pretty much, I'd say 50-50 fear and excitement, because I had watched him throw these elaborate parties, these conscious class parties. And I feel like where everyone else was attracted to the mission, I feel like I was already kind of doing that in my life. So I was more interested in love. And I've always just been searching for that in all the wrong places and the wrong hands. And so it was the worst reach I ever did in my life for someone. So I was leaving my ex-boyfriend's house and I had to fly back to LA, where I had an apartment in Marina del Rey. I had 2 days to decide. And I had told Corey, kept checking in, like, did you buy your flights? Did you buy your flights? And I just had this pit in my stomach that was like unsure. But I thought maybe it was my fear of advancing. But I also was afraid that I was going to be propositioned by him. I didn't really want that at that time. I was just like curious. There's this curious energy. So I actually finally decided when we broke up, my ex actually told me, I think that he'll be good for you. And my other girlfriends were like, maybe you'll have some cool awakening. Like, maybe this is a really cool, special new group that you can kind of refresh yourself with. So I kind of felt like I was going to a retreat. I've never actually been to retreats. I lead them. So it was exciting to me to meet such a big name in the industry as a peer, is what I was looking at it as. And so when I flew across, I actually stopped in a layover in Texas, and I called my best friend Dakota, and I was like, I feel kind of wrong about this. Like, I think I need to come home. And he gave me permission right away. He's like, okay, I'll come pick you up from LA. And as soon as he did that, I was like, no, this is my fear speaking. What am I afraid of? I need to be strong and just like go meet them. I can always leave if it's not a match. I continued on and I flew over there, and I actually came after they had one of their big sessions that we would have, where we'd sit around and someone would have an issue with someone, and we'd all gather around in a circle, and basically everyone would just kind of like hurl what they think that person's distortion is. And that person would have to stay in this like neutrality. And if you even had a little bit of emotion, that would be you being either attacked, or you're being attacked by an entity, or your ego is getting too big. So it was this really weird experience of essentially disassociating, is what it feels like, where you're trying to like not alert anyone that you're off. So they had just had one of those big things, and what they called was like a breakthrough, like how this person had just transcended and they were celebrating. So they had actually gotten so wasted. Everyone was really, really drunk. At one point, I guess Bentinho had climbed, I don't even know how, across this like these beams in this house, and was like swinging and jumped in the pool. People had been giving lap dances. And so again, I came at the end of this. Like, all the guys had their underwear on and smoking cigars at the front door, and they were like greeting me. And I was actually pretty afraid at that point. I'm like, oh my God, did I just join a sex cult? Like, what is occurring? Everyone was kind of just joking with each other and really, really like huggy and sweet. So I came in and I met everyone else. They showed me my room. It was a stunning room in Ecuador, in Quito. And it was on this cliff with all greenery and this waterfall. And so I just already was like, oh my God, they gave me this nice room. And then we walked down the hall and they're like, oh, do you want to go to Bentinho's suite? And he had this like giant room, the biggest room in the house. And it had a cigar platform lounge thing. So they pull me in there like, oh, he'll be out in a minute. And this man comes out in this white towel. He was hot. Like he was cute. He had this like air about him that just felt confident, like very confident. And I feel like it was just a contrast from all the men in my life that I had been with. It just felt real to me. And he hugged me and he wasn't creepy. He wasn't weird. He just was like sturdy, it felt like. So then I got a little more intrigued, like, that's interesting. But I still was very much like, I'm not coming to hook up with this guy. I don't want to dabble in that. I want to stay here 7 days. That's it. That was how I met him.
Partly you were looking a stage in your life, you were looking for a healthier relationship, but you weren't going there to hook up with him. You thought maybe you could get some clarity on your relationships when you were there.
I was just interested, like something about this energy that they were putting out online that I'd watched for all these years of them having these amazing parties and fireworks and everyone was in ball gowns. And I'm just, my boyfriend at the time had been telling me like, I don't like when you wear dresses. I don't like when you wear these things. So I stepped into this like grand world that really aligned with my desired way of being. So it was just like all of a sudden I got permission. It felt like I'd been in a desert and all of a sudden I got to be in water. And this person was like, oh, are you kidding? I love when you wear dresses. I love when you wear heels. Dress it up, baby, whatever you want to do. Like it was just this all of a sudden overwhelming sense of permission slip at the time, at that moment to be myself. And I felt like, oh my God, finally a man that can hold a container big enough that I can be as expressive and wild as my friends give me permission to.
Imagine yourself walking into a forest. You can see the path and the trees. High above you, the air is crisp. You are walking towards your happy place. Allegedly, say it with me. Anything said here on this podcast about alleged cults, alleged MLM schemes, alleged douchebaggery, mindfuckery, criminality, spiritual fraud, or the like is offered purely as commentary, because the views and opinions expressed on A Little Bit Culty do not necessarily reflect on official policy or position of the podcast. And any content provided by our guests, bloggers, sponsors, or authors are their opinion and are not intended to malign any religion, group, club, organization, business individual, anyone, or anything. So just let these words drift into your mind without needing to focus on any of them. You are great. You are capable. You deserve to be happy. Nobody's mad at you, unless you're actually a narcissistic, culty criminal. If that's you, cut that shit out. Don't be a fuckwad. But if that's not you, again, you are great. You are capable. You deserve to be happy. A Little Bit Culty loves you. This episode is sponsored by BetterHelp. What are your self-care non-negotiables? Maybe you never skip leg day or never miss yoga. Maybe it's getting 8 hours of sleep. I mean, that's my personal and everyone's dream, isn't it? Well, I definitely have some non-negotiables. Like I'm in Vancouver right now and I'm spending literally as much time as I can outside in nature. Hashtag cold pools, hashtag crushing it. Nature is a non-negotiable. Not enough time in the fresh air and the trees around me and I start to feel not great, not myself, not grounded. Therapy day is a bit like my nature walks. I try to not miss it. And I know I'm just going to feel so much better all around if I make it a priority. I get so much out of it. It helps me put my worries and anxieties in their rightful place and helps me clear my mind so I can focus on what I really need and sometimes what I don't need. Like, I don't need to be overbooking myself just because I hate to say no to people. You know what I mean? Thanks, therapy. Thanks for helping me see that. And if you're thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online, designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. Just fill out a brief questionnaire and get matched with a licensed therapist and switch therapists anytime for no additional charge. Look, even when we know what makes us happy, it's hard to make time for it. But when you feel like you have no time for yourself, non-negotiables like therapy are more important than ever. Never skip therapy day with BetterHelp. Visit betterhelp.com/culty today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/culty.
Meals bring people together, but for many families, providing their next meal can be a challenge. You can help by participating in Macy's annual Feeding the Hungry food drive. All proceeds go toward local food banks and families. Now through January 31st, you can purchase an icon in-store or online, or watch out for the blue Feeding the Hungry shelf tags, where a portion of your purchase will be donated to local pantries. Together, we can combat hunger in our local communities at Macy's.
Let me ask you, what was the effect of all the elaborate things they put in front of you and the way he was introduced? And I noticed the consistency. He always made it something that you would have to go do to inconvenience yourself to meet him. And then he controlled how he was introduced in a way that I'm just wondering if that had an effect, because I know this is a tactic even in businesses. They try to make the person wait 30 minutes or something like that and see how obedient you are oftentimes.
Oh my God, that's so triggering, because that was like my entire experience is, are you a good girl?
Sorry.
No, I appreciate it. I want to go there. But you bring up a good point. When I agreed and said, okay, I'll do this, I'll go.
Right.
I had to sign the NDA. And as soon as I signed the NDA, I was considered like, okay, you're approved. So I got launched into this Telegram group with everyone that was already there. And so he would have these groups that were like now in Quito, now in Mexico, now wherever we were. So I all of a sudden was in this chat group and they were just going like, chat groups on and on and on, throwing memes out. It seemed like a really jokey, funny group. I wanted to make a way for myself. I didn't want to just come in and be like, I didn't want him to know he could take advantage of me. So I crafted this like paragraph of like, he was kind of joking and telling someone that they were only allowed to post one meme a day. And like the guy that was posting these memes were really funny. So I was like, oh, here, I'll make a splash. I'll make a name for myself. I'm going to say, this is tyrannical. And what's funny is like, I was correct, but I didn't know it. I was making a joke, but he was triggered because that's what people say about him. And so he, in front of everyone, like laughed and ha-ha'd. But the next day I got this whole paragraph in a personal DM that was like, hey, I know that maybe you think you're making a joke, but I'm sensing some energy in your field that wouldn't align with the energy that we have here and wouldn't be conducive. And I just want to weed that out right now. So if you were at all serious, it was kind of like how guys say when they go out and they meet a hot girl, they'll neg them. It's like you kind of cut them down. I feel like that's what he was doing to me and kind of like hitting me a little bit to see if I would just fire back. And he wanted to make sure that I wasn't going to do that. So I right away like backed down because I was like, oh my God, I just offended this guy. Like I was just kidding. Jesus, I thought I was matching the energy of everyone. But I also kind of felt relief. Honestly, I felt relief like, oh, I'm not going to have to go anymore because he's going to kick me out. And then like, I don't have to even worry about should I go, should I not? So I told them, you know what? If you don't feel a match, I honor that. Like I want to give space to whatever's real. So no worries. That's fine. But then he was like, oh, whoa. Like, no. I'm not saying that. Why don't we jump on a call, a FaceTime with me and Corey?
There's a term for that called flying monkeys, I think.
From Oz.
Yeah.
Wizard of Oz.
Yes.
The flying monkeys who went out and edified and built the
Did
esteem
the dirty work for the narcissist.
Did the dirty work. If you had any problems, you would go to them and they would not only say the problems weren't real, they would gaslight you and say that you're the problem.
Oh, I know who all the flying monkeys are. I can name them.
Everything you're hearing is
consistent.
Like almost textbook. Like to hear you guys talk about it, particularly the one where you come in and he's already in a position of superiority and been edified.
Yeah, he's given me advice, you can call it that, on how to be more masculine. And one of the things he said is you want to stay in your center of gravity and always let the woman come to you, never go out of your way for them. That was like his masculine advice to me. So, but
he was pursuing them by negging them and
pursuing them with the flying monkeys.
Right.
Yeah.
So it always looked like the women were
pretending like they were coming to him.
And just so you know, Keith did that too all the time. I got from his flying monkeys pressure to reach out to him to go for a walk, to reach out to him to spend time together.
So true.
As though it was an honor.
It was an honor. And then he did it to the nth degree with the branding. He instructed Allison to tell the women to ask to be branded so it would look consensual. So anyway, it's just showing you the pattern, big picture. It's very manipulative.
It's crazy to hear it. Textbook.
But it's interesting also because I don't think it's important to note that everyone's why is slightly different, right? What you're looking for is different, but you are all looking for something. He comes into your life at a point when you're wanting something, you're seeking something. And then you start to notice that you all sort of touched on things that you notice were off, but you ignore it because it's so different things. It's exciting. It's grand. It's pool parties and balloons. It's waterfalls and big bedrooms. It's the answers to the universe. It's all the things. And those things always have to be more exciting and interesting and captivating and hypnotic and all that, and outweigh the bad. So let's get into what were some of the red flags that now you know are red flags that you didn't know at the time because you were enamored for different reasons. Anybody want to go first? Jacqueline, what did you notice?
So at the beginning of our relationship, one of the things that he would point out to me a lot was that I didn't spend enough money on my lifestyle and making things really nice around myself. That was something that was really important to him, to have his environment like really epic. And so even things like he would say, you don't spend enough money on your rent. You should be spending at least $5,000 a month on your rent. Like anything less than that, and you're not owning your power and manifesting. So planting these seeds of like, if you want to be abundant, you have to show the world that you're abundant, like take risks. And this leads into the next part, which was we had been seeing each other for a month. He had sort of been getting to the end of his funds. I didn't really know much about his business. And he was telling me that he was getting this major download about why we met. And he kept like saying to himself, like, no, I can't say it. I can't say it. It's just too crazy. I can't say it. And so he was kind of leading me on for a week, not sharing what this epic download from our higher selves was. And finally, he sits me down in this hotel that we were in. And he's like, I really just dive in so fast to all of my relationships. And I hate the courting phase of relationships. I love to just dive in. And I feel like we're a team, we're this divine union. I want to marry you, those kinds of things. But he was saying that like the representation of this union would be us merging our bank accounts. And he had this whole story about how he really wants to be free to share his teachings with the world and not have to worry about making money. If he could, have this reoccurring passive income, then he could gift so much more to the world. Immediately when I heard that, my heart sunk because, well, clearly that is just such an absurd proposition for someone you just met. But at the same time, I was like, oh, fuck. I feel like if I don't do this, I'm not all in our union. And I also felt like this is like my lack belief around money. Like, why am I so tight with my money that I feel like I need to have control over it? And I didn't say yes right away. And I think he could tell that it was something that I wasn't like jumping straight in at. So eventually he was like, well, how much would you feel comfortable with? And he gave me this plan of how he's going to invest it. And he's like, you know what? You'll be making so much more money. You invest your money, you'll get more of it back within a year. And then we'll have this passive income and we'll build this empire together and we'll be able to do so many wonderful things. So I decided to transfer him the money. And I convinced myself that that was a really powerful and wonderful thing to do. So if that wasn't a red flag enough, the next major thing was we had flown to Amsterdam together for the first time and the money hadn't landed yet. And in hindsight, I see now that as soon as the money landed in his bank account, his perspective of me shifted. All of a sudden, the gaslighting stopped. And I came into a room where he was sitting and he was quiet and he wasn't paying attention to me. And he was like, you know what? I'm not feeling as attracted to you as I did before. And I don't really know what it is. I don't want to feel this way. I wish I didn't feel this way. He's like, I think it's because you're not shifting fast enough. Like you're not becoming enlightened fast enough. You're not working on your issues.
Wow.
Sorry, did you mean the love bombing?
The love bombing stopped. That was when it stopped. And
Yeah,
I didn't
okay,
realize it at the time that those things coincided. So I went from being like everything that I said was amazing and on point to now you're slowing down. You're not upholding your level of the deal. Like if we're divine lovers, you need to match me. You need to meet me. I need a partner who's on the same level as me. And so that's when I started becoming really focused on trying to become enlightened, trying to figure out what my distortions were, becoming obsessive about all of that kind of stuff. And okay, we were in Amsterdam. We went out to dinner with the people from the monastery, and I had just met most of these people. And he's sitting next to me and he says, take off your shirt. And I was like, no. And he's like, take off your shirt. And I said, I'm not going to take off my shirt. And he's like, do you think that I would ask you to do something that would hurt you? Like, do you think that about me, that I would do something like that? And I was like, I'm not going to do it. Like I felt self-conscious about my body. Like all of these things were running through my head. And after that ended, he showed me this book where it talked about divine love and an example of this woman telling her lover to knock a coffee cup off the table or a glass off the table and have it shatter. And the man's like, no, that's embarrassing. I'm not going to do it. And she's like, if you love me, like you'll do this. And so he like knocks the coffee cup off of the table, it shatters, and they get up and they embrace. And it's like this divine love. At the time, I was like, oh, fuck, I didn't pass this test. Like I did this wrong. And in my head, I wanted a redo. Like I wanted to do it again and take my shirt off in the restaurant. When now I think about this story and I'm like, knocking a glass off of a table is not the same as getting naked in front of a bunch of strangers and people you just met. And I can see that his love for power and for people to see him in a certain light, this was about him wanting people to see how much control he had over his girlfriend, over the people around him, and how powerful he was that he could just tell me to take off my shirt. So there were various things where like he'd be like, you're not shifting, and then you'd like have some kind of breakthrough through some reading and he'd be really proud of you and you'd be back up on his pedestal again. And the thing that I realized is that there's this psychology experiment with rats where there's a rat in a cage and it pushes the little lever and it gets food. And if you give the rat food every time it pushes it, it'll keep doing it. If you stop at some point, eventually it'll stop pushing the lever because it knows it's not going to get any food. But if you intermittently give food to the rat, like every couple times you get it, or, you know, like there's some non-standardized amount of time, the rat will forever push the lever, even if it never gets food again, because it's like, but this could be the time. This could be the time I'm on the pedestal. Like that's what's going through my mind, that like, no matter how many times I'm knocked down, there's always the chance that like I could get it. Eventually I could get it. I could be enlightened. I could be on his level. I could figure out what my distortions are. So that was one aspect of the red flags. And the other powerful one that I feel like I should share is when we were in Panama, he had his whole plan of investing this money and he invested a large portion of it and lost it overnight. And he came to me sort of like, I have to tell you something. And he told me what happened. And I felt this immediate sense of relief, in a sense, that I had just, that like, okay, like maybe he's not this all powerful being that knows everything. And there was like relief in it. And he's like, oh, like, okay, like, well, I'll get it back to you. Don't worry. And I was like, okay, you know what we're going to do with the rest of the money? We're going to build your business. We're going to use this money in a smart way. We're going to start having retreats again. We're going to actually like be smart with your money. And we're going to pay back some of the debts that you have. We're going to like just do this the right way. You know, throughout that time, I went through various waves of like, oh, fuck, what did I get myself into? And I confided in that intuitive woman in Panama what had happened with the money and a couple other sexual things that had happened that I was confused about. And she was like, this is absurd. We're going to have an intervention. We have to go. We got to stop him. You're going to lose the rest of your money. We got to go and intervene. And I was terrified, but we did it anyways. We had this intervention and she's like, what the fuck? This is ridiculous. Like, you took this money from her. And he started crying. His response, there was no words that came out. He just broke down and he was like, nobody understands me. And like sobbing. And she turned and she goes and hugs him. And she's looking at me and she's like, hug him. He's hurt. He's hurting. Like the world doesn't understand him. And then they eye gazed for 30 minutes. And I'm sitting here, my whole being is depleted. Like, I don't know what the fuck happened. Did I fuck up? I don't know what's happening. And so we end this little intervention. We go back up to the room. And now he's not crying anymore or upset. Now he's mad. He's stoic, but he's mad. He's like, I'm so proud of myself for how I handled that situation. So proud of myself that I'm not kicking you out onto the street right now, like kicking you out. And you like this huge betrayal that you told someone about this money and we're like a union and you betrayed that. And in that moment, that's when I started gaslighting myself for the rest of our relationship because I was like, holy shit, I fucked up. I fucked up big time. I did the worst thing I could possibly done. I can't believe I didn't see this. Like, I just assumed all blame for that situation. And he told me that the reason that he lost the money was because I didn't do what he saw in his vision, which was to merge our bank accounts and give him more money. The amount of money that I gave him was not an insignificant amount of money. It wasn't a large amount of money by anyone's standards with lots of zeros. So I feel like this was where I became trapped in it because I had my money on the line And I had to convince myself that there was like meaning behind this. Otherwise, I'd have to admit to myself that I made this huge mistake.
So you had buy-in, literally.
Yeah.
You had physical equity and you had emotional equity.
Right. And I still believed in this like divine union thing. And that's what this intuitive woman was saying to me, that I had gifts to offer him in his blind spots. And that, like, you know, if he could just overcome some of these distortions himself. But it became very clear as time moved on that you can't point out anything to him that's a distortion on his behalf. If that happens, you're a service to self entity, or you're having a visit, or he's just mirroring something. So this isn't actually you. Like, this isn't actually him. He's just mirroring something you need to see about yourself.
Your money's somewhere, I bet.
Yeah, that's a different part of the
I bet
story.
it's somewhere. Yeah.
Can you let us know what a distortion is?
In the Law of One, they state that, you know, all humans are distortion because oneness is the only thing that's really perfect. So for anything to be made manifest, it has to be a distortion. And so we're supposedly ascending through these densities towards oneness, and we're supposed to be working on our distortions. And some people are more distorted than other people. I mean, I guess you could say anything, like jealousy is a form of distortion.
So human beings.
I think that makes sense.
Yeah.
We call it disintegrations.
Yeah.
Yeah, like any insecurity you have, any trauma you have that you haven't worked out, anything that's preventing you from being a clear mirror, like Bentinho claims he is, who has no distortions.
Well, how you talk about it, it's pretty succinct too.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Hey there. Hope you're enjoying the episode. Quick reminder to follow us on Instagram. You can also share your favorite episodes with friends who may or may not be in a cult, and also reach out to us to let us know who you would love to hear as a guest. And now, a word from our sponsors.
The Frankies were a picture-perfect influencer family, but everything wasn't as it seemed.
I just had a 12-year-old boy show up here asking for help. He's emaciated. He's got tape around his legs. Ruby Frankie is his mom's name.
Infamous is covering Ruby Frankie, the world of Mormonism, and a secret therapy group that ruined lives. Listen to Infamous wherever you get your podcasts.
Meals bring people together, but for many families, providing their next meal can be a challenge. You can help by participating in Macy's annual Feeding the Hungry food drive. All proceeds go toward local food banks and families. Now through January 31st, you can purchase an icon in-store or online, or watch out for the blue Feeding the Hungry shelf tags, where a portion of your purchase will be donated to local pantries. Together, we can combat hunger in our local communities at Macy's.
Keelan, can you share with us the things that you understand now are problematic, the red flags you missed when you were involved?
Yeah. So I'm learning a lot of stuff. And I'm like, holy shit, if I only knew about everything that was actually going on with them, maybe I could have woke up. So it's really interesting to see how the information and what's happening to certain people is so segregated that you don't even really know what's happening to the people that are around you.
And that's a strategy, by the way, Keelan.
Yeah. And it's like, it's insane how tightly knit he has that locked down, really. So yeah, the initial red flag for me, I'd already invested like hundreds of hours before I even met Bentinho into creating video content for him. And he invited me to Egypt, and this blog came out that they mentioned before from a journalist, and it talked about Brent's suicide and all these red flags of Bentinho. But I'd already invested so much time into him and believing in him that I had this blind spot already developed where I'm like, none of that could be true. There's no way, like whatever. So I brushed that off, went to Egypt, and immediately the first red flag was definitely the atmosphere of the group. Like hanging out with everybody, there was this weirdness in the air where everyone was like waiting for Bentinho to speak, or like was subservient in energy, or they were locked in like their expression of themselves. I remember even telling the group, like, it seems like there's like some mind games being played where you guys feel like Bentinho's better than you. And I feel like as long as we can each tap into the version of ourselves that we love, then like we can have a great time together. Because it was just weird. Everyone was quiet. Everyone was locked in. Everyone was like, didn't want to express themselves. And what I found out was the reason why is because they'd been beaten down with 1 million distortion readings, as they call it. So very shortly after experiencing that weirdness in the group, I started to see how the group behaved by hanging out with them. And one of these things that they would start doing, and they like got off on in some weird way, was like these distortion readings. So just to cover what a distortion is again, it's just like anything that's preventing you from reaching enlightenment. And so the group would get together, and Bentinho would just kind of sit there. And I remember it'd be quiet, and it would almost be like, well, who's next? like who wants a distortion reading next? And someone would like raise their hand. And I remember he had this lighter, this torch lighter, and he was just like burning this orange peel that he had like shaved off an orange on the table and was just staring at the orange peel, like burning it and like sitting and like waiting and analyzing the person and thinking about what he was going to say. And it was like this really dense environment. And then he would point out something about their character structure that was flawed or something, and would just go around the table like this. And I remember at one point, I'm like, "What? How do you know this isn't just your opinion?
Mm-hmm.
Like, how do you know what you're saying is accurate?" And he's like, "Because I'm not a person." So another red flag looking back is I never took what he said literally. I always took him with like this grain of salt where I'm like, okay, dude, like, you know what? You're a little weird, but like, I'll still be your friend and like, we can hang out, but I'm like still trying to get to the bottom of what was going on. Meanwhile, you know, he's dating two girls at the same time, one of which was Jocelyn.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm realizing they're like arguing all the time. And I'm like, wait, what? Like, you have these teachings about being empowered and living like an epic life and staying aligned vibrationally, and your relationship looks like shit. Like, what is going on here? So I remember asking him, I'm like, and watching how he behaved with women, and he'd kind of set them to quarrel amongst themselves, it seemed. And I asked him, so what? Like, anything you do is aligned, and if they have a problem with it, then it's their distortion or it's their problem. And he's like, yeah, like pretty much. I'm like, what? I'm like, so what? You're just like this clear all the time and everything you do is perfect. I'm like, you know, so that's really where it started like rubbing me the wrong way. And to the point, I remember we were on this walk next to this lake in Italy, and we had a walk home. A girlfriend he was dating at that time, he was just berating her for an hour straight, the whole walk back, just like talking down to her. Like it was like she accidentally like tripped up or walked into a spider web on this path. And he was like, well, maybe if your thoughts were aligned, you know, you wouldn't have done that. And honing, like laughing. And everyone in the group that was walking was just had their heads down and was going with it. And I'm just like fuming. Like I'm getting like pissed. Like you're getting like joy out of this. Like you're getting joy out of taking her down. It's all tied up in this sick game of if I can trigger you, then I'm helping you because I'm showing you where you're not healed yet. At some point I had this shit mapped out. I typed up this long message to the group and I was like, you're psychologically manipulating the shit out of these women. And this girl specifically, she's in a house where all the doors are open, but she can't figure a way out. I was like heated. I lost sleep the whole night. I didn't even end up sending that message in the group, but when we all got together the next day to go to the airport, it was tangible in my field. I was like pissed and I approached him directly. This is off. This is off. You have these teachings, but you have a toxic relationship. Like I started to realize he was full of shit and I was approaching him about it. What he told me was he was convinced that I had a psychic attack and that my thoughts were not my own. And essentially the whole group came to this consensus that what I was experiencing was a negative visit from demonic entities that were trying to infiltrate my mind to get a hold of the mission or to sabotage the mission. And so I'm like, okay, that's probably bullshit. But when you dress it up, you have to understand like how woo that sounds. But when you're in a group that's into spirituality and into the mission is enlightening the planet and you're playing this high stakes game, if you tag a story along that says like these demonic entities don't want the light to win and you're a light being, so they're going to try to infiltrate you, it does something to you where you're like, oh, I could see that maybe. And any small entrance point like that is a recipe for disaster. So I took it with a grain of salt, but I had to bite my tongue because I couldn't talk to anyone in that group. You know, I tried talking to Corey, who's really close with him, like one of his biggest devotees. And all she told me was like, she was only focused on trying to get me to see what Bentinho wanted me to believe. So I kind of ended up getting pushed into this corner with my own thoughts where everyone was telling me that I had a negative entity attack and I had no one to talk to. So I pretty much just packed up my shit and left.
I just have to comment that when you're in a spiritual group and you have anything negative to say, there's always the out of demonic powers or like the darkness. Like that's the ultimate gaslighting, that anything negative you might have to say, well, it's just a negative whatever entity, demon. For us, it always went back to our issues. And I just want to make also the correlation that you brought up from the beginning, that he taught you that any trigger, any emotional reaction is something that you chose. Right. So it comes from within you, which means anything that you're upset about, that he's hurting women or manipulating women or being toxic, comes from within you. Keelan, so it's just your projection or it's just your demonic spirit that's taking over your body. Anyway, I just wanted to comment that is also, it's just the height of gaslighting to ignore your opinion and what you're seeing is wrong and to say it's a demon. Just had to say that.
I'd say the first red flag should have been me having to sign a $300,000 warning NDA to even meet him or talk to him or get access. 300,000. Did I say 3,000? when I started uncovering who had left and gotten whatever, it was more and more. Like, I think mine is the highest so far. I was a big liability. And he kept telling me that actually that I was a liability to let in because I had so many followers and just the way my personality was set up. One night, this is going to be kind of out of order, but when he started taking me as, at that point he said he didn't believe in relationships. So he one night was dancing with me and it was super romantic before we were going out to dinner. And he said, if I still believed in relationships, I would totally have made you my girlfriend by now. So unfortunately for me, I didn't get the, I want to marry you and have babies with you. He didn't need to go that far with me. I was kind of all in, like I'm a committer and jumped. And so I required, I feel like, less in that manner. But one night, basically he started hooking up with me and Corey had a process around that every time. And she started getting really upset about my presence and started just having more things at me that I was doing wrong or triggers of my personality. We were in his bed, all of us cuddling. Corey was crying and upset. She just couldn't get over me being in his life. And she just felt off about it. As she said, she felt about every woman almost besides Jacqueline. And I told her, I just don't own Bentinho. Like, he's not mine. And that was kind of his practice and his teaching that he was working on me with, is like, had no ownership of him, but he had ownership of me. And one night when I first got there, one of the men came up to my room and was like, oh, I was saying I had cramps, and he was massaging me, my lower back. And when Bentinho found out about that, he pulled me aside and was like, look, if I'm investing time in you, you don't get to be with other men. And I found that attractive because I was like, oh, obviously, like, was in a low point in my life. So I was like, oh, he's committed and loyal in a way, in a sense. And so I felt like special. I said, I have no problem with that. Okay, cool. Like, I don't want him anyways. So that was a red flag. But when I told Corey, look, I think you're putting him on a pedestal and we're all on the same level, she stopped me. She's like, oh, no, we're not. He is above us and he'll never be. And nor do I want him to be anywhere near, like, I'm reaching. And he sat there and just listened to her and like agreed. And I remember feeling weird about that, but I was like, maybe I'm wrong. So my best friend has a sister who's pretty famous, and he right away told me that he wanted me to introduce them whenever he came to LA next. And they were going to date. He's like, I can already see it. We'll date for a few months and I'll take all of her followers and move them into my dominion. And I felt weird about that, obviously, and had no intention of that happening, but he just kept bringing that up and saying how that was going to happen. He could see it. A lot of his longtime followers or inner circle, 5 years, 10 years, had the same struggles. I was starting to see these distortion meetings with the same hurdle over and over and over again. I was like, if this person is so potent, if his practice and teachings are so powerful, this should be the most enlightened group ever. Everyone should be so on their shit. And it just looked like kind of like a crumbly mess and didn't match up. So one day he pulled me aside and said, I need to talk to you in the garden. This was like week 1 or 2. And he started being more loving with me and kind of letting it be romantic. And he said he had a look at my blueprints of my being here on earth and that I had the coding of enlightenment, but I was really behind. So I needed to try really hard because I had to make up ground, and I probably couldn't do it because most people can't do this. And for someone who's competitive and really like loyal and wants to commit to a bigger cause, it felt like, oh, this is my purpose. And he has this part in his book actually where he talks about this soldier, where when you're on a mission, like one of his missions, you would go and leave your family and your friends. But how do you stay when you get lonely? You remember that you're going to be back with your family and friends once the mission is completed. And I was sitting there thinking, oh, in order to encode myself with enlightenment, because he was saying my friends and my family, he started talking shit on all my friends, showing my best friends stuff and saying like, this is so dramatic. Look at how they're doing. He started telling me that I was a very like too warrior, too masculine on my Instagram. But then he would say I'm too much in victimhood. And I'm like, well, which is it? But it was like both somehow simultaneously at once. So he started saying like my friends and family weren't going to get it. So I was like, oh my God, I'm not a soldier. I'm an astronaut that has to save the world. And I don't get to go home to them, do I? And I'm just bawling in this garden in Ecuador. He's like, you're right. Exactly. You're getting it. Oh my God, baby. I'm so proud of you. He started saying too, my personality, I was too hasty. I was too fast. I moved fast. I talked fast. And when someone's hasty, they're hiding something. So then everyone started trying to uncover, like, what am I hiding? And then someone suggested in this circle meeting of distortion of me that I should take a 2-day to 3-day vow of silence. So from that moment on, I like wasn't allowed to speak. And I sat there and Corey was like, yeah, I could just feel your manipulation. So every single thought you have, ask yourself where it's coming from. Because I can see, you don't even see the water you're standing in. That was like her favorite line with me. She really did not like me, even though she was the one that invited me into this space. She was just like, you can't see the dirty water that you're staying in. So this is a little bit more triggering, I would say. But one night we were in Panama after he kind of isolated me, I'd say, to get the hook deeper. So he took me, Corey, and another person. The 4 of us flew to Panama. So he was trying to secure citizenship and make a bank account so he didn't have to have taxes or pay taxes. So that was our whole mission for him being there. So I went with him. He had me pay $1,000 for the hotel room. And I was like, that's weird, because I thought I kind of had this picture of everyone, he was always paying for everyone. But I was like, yeah, of course. Like, I don't want to feel like I'm using you. So yeah, I'll just like leave my apartment in LA and my job and all these things. And also really quickly on the 7th day when I was supposed to go home, people started saying, and him, like, you're not leaving. You're not going home. And I was like, yes, I am. And then we had this whole like meeting around me leaving. And I had to ask the question. I was like, what do I do? And he was like, look, if you leave now, you're going to lose all the ground that you've made and your spiritual enlightenment. Like, you might as well just kiss it goodbye. And Corey was like, this is the most elite group on earth. Like, I've left so many times. And she's like, I come back because there's nothing like it. So we were in Panama and I was just feeling kind of off because I was like isolated from my friends for the first time in my life. And there was a night where he called me into his bedroom, just me and him. And he said, what do you want to do? And I was like, well, I'd like to sleep with you. And he looked at me and he was like reading me and he goes, you're not spiritually enlightened enough. Like, your work has been slipping. If I slept with you right now, it'd be like a pity fuck because you're not actually advancing. So it would like require so much energy of me to give you myself. The next thing was he had a Harley Quinn and Joker archetype, which I just loved Harley Quinn on my own. And I just dyed my hair blonde and I was just kind of trying to experience more like a wild side of myself. And that's why I was even open to having this open non-relationship. One day he would love if I would set up these candles and these snacks for these hangouts after. One night I set everything up and I was wearing jeans and a sweater and I came out and I was like the last to come out. And there was like 8 guys and like 4 women there. And we're all sitting around this pool. And I was like, oddly enough, watching Suicide Squad during the day. And he had made this comment about how Corey had slept with or people had seen her naked. She'd been there 5 years. Like, every man that was there had seen her. And I had this thought early in the day, like when he said that, oh my God, I'm so glad that's not me. Like, I'm very to myself. I barely ever take my clothes off like that. Like, it just was a weird thing. So when I walked out, and before I went to sit down, he's like, baby, come here. And I'm staying in front of him. And he's like, I want you to take off all your clothes. And I just had this sinking feeling in my stomach. But you have these weird things that happen in your mind. And the first thing was, oh my God, he's psychic. He tells me he's psychic. Like, he heard me talking shit on the other girl. Like, this is my penance. I deserve this for having said that about her. And then the second thing was, oh, if I hesitate right now, if I show that I don't want to do this, that's weakness. I'm not all in. You start to get in trouble and you don't want to get in trouble. So I said something like, really? And he's like, said something like, I'm not going to ask you again, or like, take your clothes off, and just like looked at me. And I thought to myself, if I'm going to do this, I'm going to make it for me. And I'm going to turn myself into this Harley Quinn mode so that I don't have to go through this. So it's like this other badass version of me that he's helping me birth. So I just owned it. So I like took my pants off and I'm standing there in my thong and my sweater. And he's like, now the top. And I'm sitting there like, I kind of looked at the girls and they just were like, some of them were looking at the ground or just looking at me. And I thought maybe someone would say something and I would just have to not do it because like someone else had a distortion and we could focus on them and not me. So I just like doubled down and I took my sweater off and I'm in this bra and my underwear and I'm like covering myself. And so he has me come and sit between his legs and I'm covering myself. He moves my hands to the side and he takes my bra off. And so at that point, I'm sitting facing out to the men and they're all just staring. Like some of them are looking like Keelan looked the most uncomfortable, like looking to the side, but kind of just, you don't want to show weakness. So I don't blame any of them for that. But I'm sitting there and he just starts like fondling me. And I'm just like, okay. And I just went to this other place in my brain. Like, I like this. I want this. And I just stared at all of the men and like looked at them back. And then he told me to stand up and he told me to do a handstand, which sounds kind of stupid, but like I got up like praying that my underwear was in the right space because it's this tiny little closing thing. And I go and do this handstand. He made me do 3. And then I go and sit down for the duration of that whole like party. I was just naked and sitting in front of him and he was touching me, or it was like so embarrassing. I just had this pit in my stomach. Like I was that embarrassing and that lame. So there's just these things you go back and you're like, how did I not scream? How did I not just, this is not who I am at my core, but I was so stripped away. And the thing he had me focusing on most, because I didn't know his teachings, was stripping myself of any kind of humanness. So I was practicing that I wasn't real and that no one was real. So I was just walking around losing more and more myself. So he told me one time that I should just stop posting on my Instagram because I stopped being able to write like myself. He told me that the way I wrote was, dramatic and not right. So then he was just going to start, it was kind of a joke, but he was serious. He was like, I'm going to start posting my content on your page and just direct your followers to me. So I thought, yeah, like I'm kind of turning to mush right now. And he's like, yeah, you need to dissolve. So you're going to dissolve and you're going to come out the other side like this fucking butterfly. So I sent a message out to all my followers on my whatever couple thousand person mailing list, and I invited them to his retreat. And like, that is part of what I should have said that this is for. Is I feel like I've never understood my responsibility in this world to people like that. And there are people now that were following me and students of mine that went in and got involved with him because of this, and now have like so many thousands of dollars, and now their like little soul is there with him right now. And so I just want, if any of them ever hear this, just to have even a small inkling of like, what if we're wrong? What if we're wrong? And how many people's lives are just crumbling, and how many people could turn out like Brent? Because I'm so lucky that all these people here today are strong enough that they were able to crawl back to ourselves. But not many people are like this, with how severe the abuse and the like gaslighting is from him. We could all go on for 2 hours with everything, but I think that kind of just sums it all up. Besides when he told me that I was one night randomly in Costa Rica, he said he couldn't sleep with me anymore because I was just slipping farther and farther, and he didn't know if he could have me around anymore if I didn't catch up. And he started screaming at me in the doorway. And then I was just like shaking on the ground. Like, what's wrong with me? Like, why can't I get this? Like, I feel like I'm getting it, but he's telling me I'm not. And then he was like, see, you're going to totally ruin my whole retreat here. You're like such a wobble. I paid for you. You're here now. Cause he paid for that hotel room for me. And I was teaching for free at his retreat and had so many of my students come. And then that night, I was in my room just trying to like calm my nervous system down and sleep. And then he sends a group. I had a group chat with this woman, Ari, and Corey and Ben and I. And he sent a message saying, I'm being attacked. I can't breathe. This thing is trying to kill me. And it's Jade. It's Jade. There's an STS that's infiltrated Jade, and she's attacking me. I'm sitting in my room like shaking. Like, what the fuck do I do? I don't even know how to get it out. Like, how did it get in me? And so it's just constantly like, he's constantly like pointing out and making scars on your body and wounds. And then you're picking at them because you're like, where is it coming from? Like, how? And so it's just this constant berating of your soul to the point where you just believe whatever. You're like, man, I am so manipulative. I'm such a piece of shit. How could anyone ever trust me? So I had to go to Ari. I had to like run through this resort in the middle of the night trying to find her. I'm crying. I couldn't even breathe. I sit in front of her and she's just there to try and like coach me. And she's talking to me and like, this is where it's coming from. And this is how you need to get it out of you. And it just felt like this weird space where like you're scrubbing your skin with Clorox, being like, how can I become clean again? So when I got out, I just wasn't going to respond to anyone because I was afraid. And the last thing too is the one time he always liked us to tan topless or naked. So me and Corey were like lounging topless, like didn't know he was around, didn't know where he was. And he had been snapping photos of us naked. And he like went on his Instagram and he posted it on his story, and he put like little tiny, like a little tiny thing over our nipples, but like I was completely naked. And so was Corey. And I just felt immediately like, oh my God, I've never done that on my page. And he's posting this on my behalf. I felt bad for my ex-boyfriend. I felt bad for my parents. Like everyone was kind of watching because I stopped telling the story because I was losing my words, and he was telling my story now. And I just felt like sickened, and I kind of hesitated. But the only reason he posted it and he took it down after a few minutes was he was like, dang, if Jade's followers see that I'm posting this, they're going to think that I'm manipulating her. It's going to look too bad. It wasn't that I was uncomfortable, that me and Corey were like, we don't even like this photo. Like it was that he was going to look bad. So anyways, I just want to say for anyone out there that is embarrassed or has gone through these like super traumatic, or where you think you convinced yourself that you wanted this, that you were a part of this, like Sarah said, like, don't take that on. It's not for you to take on. And like, there's some quote I heard in high school, no one can tell you how you survive. And I feel like that's a valid point for all of us of like just trying to make it through these situations. So thank you.
I'm so angry at him on your behalf. And I'm so sorry that you went through that. It's not right. It's inhumane. It is abusive. It is disgusting. In the name of spiritual growth, it just makes me so livid. I feel your pain, and I'm so sorry. You didn't deserve it at all. We tell our stories. We change the world. A Little Bit Culty is proud to support the #IGotOut project, which empowers survivors of cultic abuse to share their stories online as a catalyst for education, prevention, and healing. Learn more about the #IGotOut movement and find resources at igotout.org. We're going to take a little break there, everybody. Thank you for listening. Stay tuned for part 2, where we figure out how all of these people saw the red flags eventually, woke up, got out, and healed. Or in this case, are healing. See you soon.
Sinking down to the depths of the ocean. I'm hanging on to the weight of my love. If I let go of it all, I could leave, but I know I won't.
Let's keep the conversation going. We'll be back soon with more episodes of A Little Bit Culty with more experts and survivors. And sometimes experts who are survivors, as well as some familiar faces from The Vow from HBO. If you've got suggestions or questions on upcoming topics, find us on Instagram at A Little Bit Culty.
And for more background on what brought me here, my memoir, Scarred, the true story of how I escaped Nexium, the cult that bound my life, is available on Amazon, Audible, and where most books are sold.
If you'd like to help us spread the word about A Little Bit Culty podcast, please give us a 5-star review and tell your friends to subscribe.
Seriously, take out their phone and tell them to press subscribe. Takes a second. We're also available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and every major listening app. And if you're listening on a smartphone, tap or swipe over the cover art of this podcast to find show notes and helpful resources.
You might also find some offers from our sponsors there. And when you support our sponsors, you help us keep this podcast going. Just don't be a little bit culty about it.
A Little Bit Culty is executive produced by me, your co-host, Sarah Edmondson, and Anthony Nippy Ames.
That's me.
Associate producer is Jess Tardy. Produced, edited, mixed, and mastered by Citizens of Sound. Our amazing theme song, Cultivated, is by John Bryant and co-written by Nigel Asselin. I'm Sarah Edmondson, and thanks for listening to A Little Bit Culty.
What is your pre-show ritual?
I mean, yeah, occasionally I'll probably have a on stage. It loosens you up, doesn't it? What?
I was totally joking. I didn't expect you to be honest.
Oh, sorry, fair. I'm always honest.
Moving right along
Anyway,
again.
sorry. You know what I mean? Gets you loose, doesn't it?
You know what your dad does? He prays.
Does he? Mm-hmm. Does he pray? Fair. I love that. Cool.
Billboard chart-topping singer and songwriter Youngblood joins the Osbournes podcast, dropping August 13th. Listen now wherever you get podcasts.